Hello and welcome to this special edition of Vantage. It's our final day here in Paris. We won't miss the biting cold, I can tell you, but we will miss the vibes. I know the AI summit flattered to deceive, but in Washington, something could be brewing. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is there. He's all set to meet US President Donald Trump. We'll be tracking that meeting closely for you. So make sure you stay tuned to Firstpost. We're also taking a closer look at Prime Minister Modi's entourage. It includes National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. Remember, US courts have summoned Doval in the Khalistan case. So why has he risked this trip? Has Donald Trump offered him protection? We'll discuss what we know. Also on the show, how India and America are adding new chapters to their relationship. This time, with defense and energy. What did Trump say to Putin in their first publicized phone call? How did Vance do on his diplomatic debut in Paris? Why US anticipates an Israeli strike on Iran? What is Turkish President Erdogan doing in Pakistan? What is India's new tax bill? And why is it needed? Also a special report on Valentine's Day. All this and more lined up. The headlines first.
In Germany, at least 28 people injured after a car rams into a crowd in Munich. It comes a day before the city hosts a high-profile security conference, which will be attended by US Vice President J.D. Vance and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The driver of the vehicle has been detained. He is a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker. In India, President's rule imposed in Manipur. Just days ago, the Chief Minister of the violence-hit state had resigned. The ruling BJP failed to reach a consensus on Biren Singh's successor. The northeastern state of Manipur has been battling ethnic violence for nearly 2 years. Hamas says it'll adhere to freeing Israeli hostages according to the timeline set in the ceasefire deal. This comes as negotiators push to overcome an impasse regarding its implementation. The fragile ceasefire has been strained in recent days after Donald Trump said that hell would break loose if all Israeli hostages in Gaza weren't freed by Saturday. Jailed Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye is said to be critically ill. He's been on a hunger strike to protest his detention. Last November, he was abducted in Kenya and now faces the death penalty on treason charges in a court-martial. And Japanese auto giants Honda and Nissan scrapped their merger talks. Reports say the discussions unraveled after Honda proposed making the struggling Nissan a subsidiary. The bid to join forces was to counter US titan Tesla and Chinese firms in the electric vehicle market.
Every foreign trip is important, but some have a different feel to it. The vibes, the expectations, the stakes, all of it feels different. And that's the case here. In Prime Minister Narendra Modi's trip to the United States of America, he reached Washington on Wednesday evening, but the weather was not so welcoming. The forecast said snow and sleet. Temperatures dipped to almost 2 degrees Celsius. Thankfully, the Indian community was around, even in the freezing cold. They gave him a warm welcome. Take a look. The Prime Minister is not staying at a hotel, he is staying at the Blair House. It is located right across the White House. It serves as the US President's official guest house. Only important guests are hosted there, like world leaders or royalty. A number of Indian Prime Ministers have stayed at the Blair House, including Prime Minister Modi back in 2014. Once he arrived there, his engagements began. The first meeting was with Tulsi Gabbard. She is Trump's Director of National Intelligence. It's a very important position in America. Even the CIA and the National Security Agency report to her. Gabbard was confirmed by the Senate on the same day, so Prime Minister Modi congratulated her. He also discussed India-US relations. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has been a strong advocate for closer ties. Despite her name, she does not have Indian heritage, but she is a practicing Hindu. And the meeting with Gabbard was just the start. Prime Minister Modi has a packed schedule today. He has around 6 bilateral meetings lined up. We don't have the details yet, but the Prime Minister is expected to meet the following people: Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and of course the big one, US President Donald Trump. The meetings will start in a short while from now, and the day will end with a private dinner at the White House. All eyes will be on the Trump bilateral. We are mainly looking for two outcomes. One, can Modi and Trump rekindle their old bromance? And two, can they strike a trade deal? A deal to avoid a tariff war. We'll probably have the answers by tomorrow, but for now, let's focus on Modi's team. Let me pull up that picture of him meeting Tulsi Gabbard. Now look who's sitting on the side. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. Now you may wonder what's so special about that. Doesn't the NSA travel with the Prime Minister? Well, normally yes, he does. But in September last year, he did not. And a lot of people attributed it to the Khalistan case. Now some quick background here. US officials are investigating an alleged assassination plot. The target? Khalistani separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. US officials say that India tried to kill him. They've also named National Security Advisor Ajit Doval in this case, after which a New York court summoned him. Now, the summon was not officially served to Mr. Doval, but the move was hostile and frankly unnecessary, which could be why he skipped the last meeting in September. But this time, Ajit Doval is in Washington. The question is, what does this signal? Is America softening its position? It certainly seems like it. Remember, this Khalistan probe was ordered under Joe Biden. The summons were issued under Joe Biden, and Doval skipped the trip under Joe Biden. But under President Donald Trump, perhaps India feels more confident. I know this trip has a packed agenda. The focus will be on trade and defense. But we say Prime Minister Modi should get a word in on Khalistan as well. These terrorists have found a safe haven in America. Just look at Pannu. On Tuesday, he was inside the US Capitol. He claimed that he was giving so-called evidence of India's meddling abroad. As always, Pannu made a video of it, and frankly, he does not look like a Capitol visitor. He looks like one of those ghosts from Harry Potter, just weirdly lurking around. Take a look at this. Pannu says the US must arrest Ajit Doval. We say it's wishful thinking. Trump is keen on building ties with India. The only irritant seems to be tariffs at this point. If both sides work on that, this relationship will flourish. And if it does, India must capitalize on it. You have a president sympathetic to India's interests. You have strong India advocates in his cabinet. So now is the time to push on, to nudge America towards cracking down on Khalistanis. We should not miss this chance. We mentioned tariffs briefly. That is certainly a hiccup in the relationship, but overall the trajectory is good. India and the US are drawing closer to each other, and they're adding new facets to their ties. Today we are focusing on two of them, two of the new facets. One is defense cooperation, and the second is energy partnership. Let's look at defense first. Two deals are expected to be discussed by Modi and Trump. A deal for US combat vehicles and for jointly producing fighter jet engines. The jet engine deal was signed back in 2023, but progress has been slow. Plus, several deals are in the implementation stage, like the deal for drones. Last year, India agreed to buy 31 Predator drones. The total cost was $3.5 billion. But Prime Minister Modi and President Trump will take, both Prime Minister Modi and President Trump will take stock of these deals, perhaps try to speed things up, because a number of US shipments are running late. In 2020, India bought Apache helicopters from Boeing. The first batch was expected by June 2024. But not a single one has been delivered so far. Same with jet engines. In 2021, India placed an order for 99 General Electric engines. Deliveries were supposed to start in 2023. Again, not a single one has arrived. Such delays are not a good look, especially in a budding defense relationship. You see, India has historically bought weapons from Russia, but recently we've been diversifying. New Delhi wants to produce more weapons at home, of course. It also wants to pursue other sellers like France, America, and Israel. Now, if you look at the numbers, you can see this pivot. From 2009 to 2013, the US made up just 8% of India's defense imports, 8%. Then from 2014 to 2018, it rose to 13%. But in the last 5 years, it has stagnated. The US is still stuck at 13%. And that's something that both leaders should look at. Because in the same time, France has gained a lot. They made up just 0.9% of India's defense imports from 2009 to 2013, 0.9%. And today, France makes up 33%. So what is it that Paris is doing that Washington is not? That's a question to look at. Equally important is India's defense exports. The US is the top market for Indian arms. It makes up 50% of all Indian defense exports. So the scope is immense, which brings us to the second facet. Energy ties. India's petroleum minister has made it quite clear he wants to import more energy from the United States of America. Again, this is new. Most of our energy has come from West Asia and now Russia. The US is only the 5th largest supplier of oil. In the ongoing fiscal year, India imported oil worth $4 billion from America. That's 1.8% down from the year before. Then how can India and the US be energy partners? Well, thanks to LNG. That's liquefied natural gas. Right now, natural gas makes up just 6% of India's energy mix. The target is to take it up to 15% by 2030. And that means importing more. Reports say India's LNG imports could double by 2030. Enter America. The US is the world's largest LNG producer. Until recently, it was India's 3rd largest supplier, but last year the US overtook the UAE. It is now the 2nd largest LNG supplier, and more deals are being lined up. India's state-run energy firms are on the job, the likes of GAIL, Indian Oil and Bharat Petroleum. They're all negotiating with US suppliers. The goal is to sign a long-term LNG deal. Now, both these items are strategically important, energy and defense. They can transform bilateral ties. They can create a sort of strategic dependence, which in turn leads to closer ties. Of course, the risk is pretty obvious. You must be sure that you can trust the other side. Prime Minister Modi seems to have that trust in America. Let's see how this pivot plays out. US President Donald Trump has dropped a bomb. The metaphorical kind, thankfully, but it still managed to shake the world. Trump spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday about finally ending the war in Ukraine. Trump held a press conference after that. Take a look at this first.
We had a very good talk with, people didn't really know what President Putin's thoughts were, but I think I can say with great confidence he wants to see it ended also. That's good. And we're going to work toward getting it ended and as fast as possible.
Trump says Putin is on board. He said the Russian president wants to end the war in the not-so-distant future. Trump said he mentioned the possibility of a ceasefire, and Putin seemed agreeable. Trump has formed a team to lead the negotiations. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, U.S. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. You may have noticed something about this team. It doesn't have a single Ukrainian on it. No Europeans either, just Trump's men. And think about the call. Trump spoke to Putin one-on-one. It is only after that that Trump called Zelensky, effectively to tell him what had been discussed. Trump was asked about this. His response would probably have left Zelensky shaking in his boots.
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace. I said that was not a good war to go into, and I think they have to make peace. That's what I think.
Why did you decide to provide support to Ukraine? Would you support Zelensky ceding territory or exchanging territory in any agreement to end the war?
Well, he's going to have to do what he has to do, but, you know, his poll numbers aren't particularly great, to put it mildly. He's got a country where, you know, it's been savaged and attacked.
Zelensky was most likely blindsided. The Ukrainian president met a member of Trump's staff yesterday, Trump's new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Zelensky was working out a deal to give the U.S. rare metals, rare earths, in exchange for security. This was Zelensky before his call with Trump.
Putin does not want to end the war. If Ukraine was in NATO, its army would be equal to Russia's.
And this was Zelensky after the call with Trump.
Very substantive negotiations with the United States of America. I had a good, in-depth conversation with President Trump, and I appreciate President's genuine interest in our shared opportunities and how we can bring true peace closer together. It was a long discussion. We discussed many details, including diplomatic, military, and economic matters. President Trump informed me of what Putin told him. We believe that America's strength, together with us and all our partners, is enough to pressure Russia and Putin into peace.
Zelensky tried to put up a brave face after his call with President Donald Trump, but as I said, he seems to have been blindsided. Zelensky started the day talking about joining NATO, about becoming a match for Putin on the battlefield. But Donald Trump shot all of that down.
Do you oppose NATO membership for Ukraine?
I don't think it's practical to have it, personally.
If the war were to end, he says he wants guarantees of security.
We'll see what that means.
So effectively, it looks like the US is dealing with Russia directly now, and Ukraine will just have to accept whatever it is offered. Trump is planning to meet Putin in person multiple times apparently. Their first meeting will probably be in Saudi Arabia.
I think so. We think we're going to probably meet in Saudi Arabia, the first meeting. Hasn't been set, but not too distant future.
Will Zelensky be part of that meeting?
We both understand, we know the Crown Prince, and I think it'd be a very good place to meet.
Now, Saudi Arabia is a largely neutral venue, unlike anywhere in Europe or China for that matter. So a Trump-Putin meeting in Saudi Arabia does make sense. Their meeting should take place soon. But the question is, will Zelensky get invited? Or will he just have to sign whatever is sent to him after the meeting? Overall, it seems that Trump may actually manage to end the war in Ukraine. Judging by his rhetoric, Zelensky will have to give up all his ambitions. He may have to cede land to Russia, drop his plans of joining NATO, and possibly even the European Union. And if that happens, it will mean that Putin gets everything that he wants with Trump's blessing. This week was very important for J.D. Vance. It was his big diplomatic debut, and I must say, Trump threw him into the deep end. First was a global summit on artificial intelligence. Vance had to spell out US AI policy. He also had to refuse signing on to the joint statement. His next assignment is in Munich, where he will attend a security conference. J.D. Vance will have to lay out Trump's approach to Europe, not to mention clarify his moves on Ukraine. These are tough missions for any politicians, but especially so for a novice like J.D. Vance. Trump literally picked him in the middle of his first ever term as senator. So he's virtually a beginner on foreign policy. So how did his debut go? Our next report tells you.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
James David Vance. That's what the JD stands for, James David. Not everyone knows this, because Vance isn't exactly very famous. Not yet, anyway. The US Vice President is usually in the shadow of his Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump. But this week, Vance has been given a chance to step out of that shadow. Trump sent his VP to Europe, first to attend the AI summit in Paris, and then on to Munich in Germany for the annual Munich Security Conference, which begins tomorrow. Vance has been given a difficult task. He has to represent the Trump administration in Europe, while the continent is wary of Trump's every move. Vance has to reassure America's European allies, but also make sure to push Trump's America First agenda. It's an unenviable task, a trial by fire. But let's see how the US VP has performed so far, starting with the Paris AI Summit.
The United States of America is the leader in AI, and our administration plans to keep it that way. And let me be emphatic about this point. America wants to partner with all of you, and we want to embark on the AI revolution before us with a spirit of openness and collaboration. Many of our most productive tech companies are forced to deal with the EU's Digital Services Act and the massive regulations it created about taking down content and policing so-called misinformation.
J.D. Vance effectively said it all with those 3 points. America will be first, it wants to work with Europe, but Europe has to follow America's rules. Vance's speech was combative. He rejected all the talk about safety and regulation, and eventually he didn't sign the final joint statement. But he left the door open for future collaborations, on America's terms. All in all, he seems to have done what was expected of him. Outside the summit, he met a host of world leaders. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was among them. PM Modi had a few gifts for Vance's children, gifts that could reaffirm their ties to India. Remember, the VP's wife, Usha Vance, is of Indian descent, so their children have ties to the subcontinent. Prime Minister Modi seems to have considered this while giving them gifts. Vance also attended some less friendly meetings with European leadership.
We're going to talk a lot about, I'm sure, some trade issues, some economic issues, and the Trump administration has been very clear that we care a lot about Europe. We see a lot of economic relationship to build upon with Europe, and we also want to make sure that we're actually engaged in a security partnership that's good for both Europe and the United States. So,
again, he basically said that the US is open to collaboration, but it will be America first. It's a tough line to walk. And it'll be even tougher tomorrow at the Munich Security Conference. Vance will have to explain Donald Trump's latest move, his call with Vladimir Putin about ending the war in Ukraine. Trump seems to have left Europe out in the cold. He didn't consult with them. So Vance will have to explain that as well, which means his trial by fire isn't over yet.
Now let's look at West Asia. Turmoil could return to the area any day. The Gaza ceasefire was looking increasingly fragile, with Hamas initially saying it would delay the release of Israeli hostages. This prompted threats from both the US and Israel. But even as this crisis is unfolding, a new concern has popped up. A new US intelligence report which says that Israel plans to launch an attack against its arch nemesis, Iran. The report says that Israel wants to hit Iranian nuclear facilities, 2 in particular, in Fordo and Natanz. Now, these sites are located to the south of Iran's capital, Tehran. They're in the middle of the country. But Israel sees an opening. Now, you may remember what happened last October. Israeli forces attacked Tehran's military facilities and Iran's air defenses. This was a tit-for-tat attack. After Iran fired missiles at Israel, Israel was initially considering a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities back then as well. But former US President Joe Biden rejected that idea, so Israel had to opt for something else. They had to hit conventional military sites and air defenses instead, not Iran's nuclear sites. And the air defenses part is important here. It weakened Iran's shield against future attacks. It left the country more vulnerable to further strikes, including strikes on its nuclear facilities. And this is reportedly still the case. Iran is still vulnerable. Iran's air defenses are not back to their former levels. So Israel believes that the iron is hot, and it should use this opportunity to hit Iran's nuclear sites. There's another reason why Israel is thinking about this now. It's because Joe Biden has left office, and the new US president is Donald Trump. His support for Israel is well known, as is his opposition to Iran. During his first term, Donald Trump had applied what he called the maximum pressure policy towards Iran. And now he wants to do the same. Does this mean that Israel has Trump's support to target Iran's nuclear sites? Well, not really. Yes, Trump wants to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, but he seems opposed to the idea of attacking Iran, at least for now. He wants to try talks first.
I say this, and I say this to Iran, who's listening very intently. I would love to be able to make a great deal, a deal where you can get on with your lives and you'll do wonderfully. You'll do wonderfully. Incredible people, industrious, beautiful, just an unbelievable group of people in Iran.
Trump said all of this while standing right next to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Clearly, he does not want to bomb Iran arbitrarily, not before trying to work out a deal. Netanyahu may have been taken aback because this is what he said next.
We also see eye to eye on Iran. That's the same Iran that tried to kill us both. They tried to kill you, Mr. President. They tried through their proxies to kill me. We're both committed to rolling back Iran's aggression in the region and ensuring that Iran never develops a nuclear weapon.
But when it comes to bombing Iran, Netanyahu and Trump do not see eye to eye. Reports say that Trump shot down Netanyahu's plan. He refused to launch a military attack on Iran, and this is what he said on social media, that he wants Iran to be a successful nation, and that reports about US and Israeli strikes were quote-unquote greatly exaggerated. Now let's look at the US intelligence reports again. They talk about Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear facility. But the strikes would have to be supported by the US. America would have to help Israel with aerial refueling, with surveillance, and with reconnaissance. The reports do not talk about a solo Israeli strike. Also remember, Iran's nuclear sites are not sitting ducks. They are located underground, with their own defenses, of course. Israel would need a lot of additional support and firepower to destroy them. Without that, the strikes would be superficial. They would just set Iran back by weeks, maybe months, but they would also give Iran more reason to build nuclear weapons. So a solo Israeli strike may end up being an own goal. At least this is America's analysis. Some Israeli officials disagree with this. They think the US is not giving them enough credit. So will Israel really go ahead with its attack, even without Donald Trump's approval? Or will it wait for Trump to try and talk things out first? I guess we'll find out in the weeks to come. President Trump has been trying to downsize the US government, and he has made the world's richest man in charge of this mission. Elon Musk has taken a hacksaw to the federal bureaucracy, and he is taking it on one agency at a time. Now it is NASA's turn. This is America's space agency, and Elon Musk's DOGE is coming for it. That's the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. It plans to trim NASA's spending. Hundreds of NASA employees have already accepted Trump's buyout plan. So what does this mean for NASA's future? Are Trump's buyouts working? And what about the conflict of interest here? Considering that Musk's SpaceX has contracts worth about $15 billion with NASA. Our next report tells you.
President Donald Trump wants to trim all the fat in the US government, and he's put Elon Musk in charge of this mission. The world's richest man is heading DOGE, that's the Department of Government Efficiency, and it's trying to downsize the US government.
I'll tell him to go here, go there. He does it. He's got a very capable group of people. Very capable. They know what they're doing. They'll ask questions, and they'll see immediately as somebody gets tongue-tied that they're either crooked or don't know what they're doing. We have very smart people going in, so I've instructed him go into education, go into military, go into other things as we go along, and they're finding massive amounts of fraud, abuse, waste, all of these things.
Musk has taken a hacksaw to the federal bureaucracy, one agency at a time. And now NASA is his next target. That's the US Space Agency. Its acting administrator, Janet Petro, has said that DOGE plans to examine NASA's spending. A small group of officials have already begun to examine NASA's various space mission programs, which make up the agency's roughly $24 billion annual budget. They are looking at NASA's payments and trying to slash them like they've done in other agencies. And that's not all. Petro also claims that hundreds of NASA employees have accepted a government buyout proposal. Yesterday, a federal judge lifted the pause on Trump's buyout program. As it closed to applicants, about 75,000 federal employees had accepted Trump's offer. That's about 3.3% of the federal government's 2.3 million workers, and below the White House's projections of 5 to 10% of the workforce who were expected to accept the buyouts. Among these, hundreds of employees belong to NASA. And this comes ahead of Musk's cost-saving plans at the agency, which has been criticized heavily. Of course, there are the general ethical questions. Is Musk really allowed to fire US government employees? Why does a temporary worker have so much power? Simply because he reportedly bankrolled an election. Plus, there are privacy concerns. Why should Musk or Doge members enjoy nearly unfettered access to data across federal agencies? Where is the oversight? So, there are a lot of unanswered questions. But what's worse is this. Experts say there is an extreme conflict of interest. SpaceX, which is owned by Musk, is NASA's largest private contractor. It has roughly $15 billion worth of contracts with the space agency. Now, Petro says that NASA has very strict conflict of interest policies. But maybe they are not strict enough. Because this is not just a violation of those policies, it also puts NASA's future at risk. Let's take their flagship space program, for instance, the Space Launch System, or SLS. SLS is supposed to take American astronauts back to the moon. Musk has called it outdated, over budget. He says thinking about the rocket makes him sad. What he prefers instead is a potential mission to Mars. So his involvement has thrown NASA's moon ambitions into uncertainty, and they can upend America's race with China, which has targeted a moon landing in 2030.
They've got the flag up now, and you can...
So NASA could be a turning point for Trump's restructuring mission. If his sidekick cancels the SLS, if he doesn't let it fly to the moon, it will be a telltale sign of just how powerful Musk has become and what else he can do that will be allowed to fly.
Now let's turn our attention to Indonesia. This is Southeast Asia's biggest economy. It is home to more than 100 million people under the age of 30. Basically, it has a young, tech-savvy population, yet Apple does not have an official store in this country. And last year, the company was dealt a bigger blow. Indonesia banned Apple iPhone 16 sales over lack of investment. So now the tech giant is trying to woo their government. It is taking steps to potentially make iPhones in Indonesia. But will this plan work? And is this the new template? Here is a report.
Apple is trying to woo Indonesia again. The tech giant is taking steps to potentially make iPhones in the Southeast Asian country, so that Indonesia lifts the ban on the company and ends the saga that began nearly 4 months ago. Here's some context. Indonesia is Southeast Asia's biggest economy. Plus, it has a young and tech-savvy population. More than 100 million Indonesians are under the age of 30. Meanwhile, Apple does not have a single official store in the country, so those who want to buy its products buy them from resale platforms. But in October last year, Apple found itself in a peculiar situation. Indonesia banned the iPhone 16 in the country. It prohibited the marketing and sale of the model that was being imported, because the company failed to meet the country's strict investment regulations, which require companies to source up to 40% of their device components locally. To reach that percentage, Apple needs to invest in Indonesia. It should source Indonesian materials to be used for iPhone components. Apple had initially committed to investing $100 million in local research and development facilities in the country. But those investments only reached $95 million. They fell short of reaching the target. So, Indonesia banned Apple. This came as a major blow to the company, which is battling falling sales in nearly all markets the world over. So, following the ban in Indonesia, Apple pledged an additional $10 million and a new factory in Bandung City, which would manufacture accessories and components for Apple devices. These efforts were still not enough to circumvent the ban. So now, Apple has gone 10 steps further. It has made a new investment commitment of $1 billion, alongside a local manufacturing facility specifically for Apple AirTag trackers. These are devices that help people keep track of objects, such as keys or backpacks. And Apple is inclined to manufacture them in Indonesia. According to reports, it is also in talks with supply chain partners in the country to set up iPhone assembly lines. If the move materializes, if Indonesia lifts the iPhone ban, it'll become the second country in Southeast Asia with iPhone manufacturing facilities after Vietnam. This would not only allow Apple to regain its lost market, it'll benefit Indonesia as well. When it comes to consumer electronics, iPhone supply chains are quite sophisticated. So the move will elevate Indonesia's tech manufacturing industry. It'll give the country an economic boost, obviously. It would help create jobs. And by the looks of it, these results aren't too far away. It seems like Indonesia has succeeded in setting a template for foreign manufacturing and investment. Because apparently, Tim Cook is willing to cave in to become the apple of Indonesia's eye.
Our next story is from Pakistan, South Asia's most fiscally unstable nation. Pakistan is hosting a very special guest today, a guest that their Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif considers a brother. No, the leader is not from China, not Saudi Arabia either. No, not the UAE. Okay, so Shehbaz Sharif has a lot of credit cards. I mean, brothers. But this one is very special, really. It's Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan landed in Rawalpindi last night. He was greeted by Prime Minister Sharif and Pakistan's President Asif Ali Zardari. It was a grand welcome. And it continued today. There was a guard of honor, a ceremonial tree planting, a fighter jet salute with F-16s, and even a meeting with Pakistan's real leader, the Chief of Army Staff, General Asim Munir. But the thing that takes the cake might be this: a song prepared by the Pakistani government in praise of Erdogan. Priceless. You can't fake flattery like that. Islamabad must have been hoping for something truly game-changing in return. Once all the elaborate greetings were out of the way, Erdogan and Sharif got to business. They signed 24 agreements. They covered a range of sectors. Pakistan wants to increase bilateral trade with Turkey from the current 1 billion to 5. There are also reports of cooperation in Syria. You know that Bashar al-Assad's government fell last December thanks to Turkey-backed rebel groups. Turkey will be involved in rebuilding Syria, and Pakistan wants a slice of that business as well. And then we come to defense. Turkey is already Pakistan's second largest arms supplier. 11% of Pakistan's defense imports come from Turkey. They also have joint projects, including on warships and even stealth fighters. Pakistan and Turkey are collaborating on Turkish Khan fighter jets. They're set to build a joint factory for it. And of course, when it comes to Turkey and defense, there's always talk about drones. Pakistan already operates Turkish drones, both the Bayraktar TB2 and the Akinci. As you can see, Turkey-Pakistan military ties run deep, so don't be surprised if they get deeper. However, all this is annoying, if not bad news for India, because Erdogan is one of the few leaders who keeps trying to butt into the Kashmir issue. Most countries keep out of it. They recognize that Kashmir is a bilateral issue exclusively between India and Pakistan. Pakistan does not like this fact. It keeps trying to encourage world leaders to interfere, and Erdogan is one of the few that takes the bait every time. Shehbaz Sharif thanked Erdogan for this today, showering him with praise for his quote-unquote unwavering support after talking about Kashmir. Without batting an eyelid, Sharif moved on to talking about Pakistan fighting terrorism. You can't make this up, like I said. Sharif spoke about the menace of terrorism, lamenting all the lives lost. How can someone be so tone deaf? Pakistan keeps sponsoring terrorism in Kashmir. It is the reason for thousands of lives lost. But Shehbaz Sharif is calling Pakistan a victim of terrorism. The only reason it is a victim is because it bred those terrorists in the first place. Now Islamabad is upset because it has lost control over its weapons. The hypocrisy is unbelievable, but sadly, it was to be expected. Erdogan is not going to correct Shehbaz Sharif. He has weapons to sell. And we know one thing. When the people are starving, Pakistan will always opt to buy weapons over wheat. Major changes are afoot back home. The government of India has introduced a new income tax bill. The current one is 6 decades old. So the finance minister is overhauling it. When she introduced the bill, protests broke out in Parliament. A number of opposition MPs also walked out, but ultimately the bill was introduced with a voice vote. The next step is to review it. The bill has been sent to the Parliamentary Committee. The committee will now review and maybe suggest changes. After that, it can be passed into law. Now, I know there are obvious questions here. Why do we need a new income tax law? What was wrong with the old one? And will this affect your tax rates? Our next report has the answers.
Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman. The Income Tax Act was originally enacted.
India is getting a new income tax law. The bill was introduced in Parliament today and is now heading to a special committee for review. Once passed, it will replace the existing law, the 6-decade-old Income Tax Act of 1961. Let's get the most pressing question out of the way first. Will your tax change? The answer is no. The recent union budget had introduced new tax rates and slabs. Income up to 12 lakh rupees is now tax-free. Those rates and tax slabs have been retained.
Slabs and rates.
Then what's the point of this new bill? To make the income tax code clear and concise. The existing law is quite bulky. It has 47 chapters and 819 sections. The new bill has 23 chapters and 536 sections, so it's significantly smaller. It's also a lot easier to read and understand. The sentences are much shorter. Complex legal jargon has been removed and more tables have been added for visual representation. Here's an example of that simplicity. The current law has a previous year and an assessment year. You make money in the previous year, say 2024 to 2025, but you pay in the assessment year, which is 2025 to 2026. Sounds a bit complicated, doesn't it? The new bill has removed the concept of assessment year, and previous year has been renamed. It is now simply tax year. Certain words have also been swapped out. The existing law has the word notwithstanding in a lot of places. That's being replaced with irrespective of anything. What's the idea behind this shorter, simpler tax code? A, it's easier for taxpayers to read and understand. And B, it makes tax litigation easier because there's no confusion about the clauses. Most experts have welcomed the move, but a few are not impressed. They admit the changes will improve readability, but they feel more should have been done. After all, this is a review after 64 long years. Nonetheless, it's a step in the right direction. If you pay taxes, there are a few changes that will interest you. Number 1, you will have more time to file updated returns. Let's say you made a mistake or forgot something in your filings. Right now, you have 2 years to update it. The new law will raise it to 4 years. Number 2, the bill has a taxpayer's charter. It lists out your rights and duties as a taxpayer. Number 3, explicit provisions for digital assets. Things like cryptocurrency have been defined as property, much like land, shares or jewellery. This is clearly a much-needed update to India's tax code. The rest is up to the Parliament. The MPs will convene again on March 10th. After that, the bill will be put to vote. If passed, the new tax law will come into effect on April 1st, 2026. So there's enough time for a full dissection.
Chocolates in heart-shaped boxes, bursting displays of red and pink bouquets, bright red teddy bears, local cinemas featuring Shah Rukh Khan and Hugh Grant, you guessed it. It is that time of the year again. It is Valentine's Day tomorrow, or in other words, a national holiday for the floral industry. After all, the flower business booms during the Valentine's week, and roses are the crown jewel of this industry. They're among the top-selling flowers worldwide. More than 250 million roses are produced for Valentine's Day alone. For one day, 250 million roses.
I think it's going to be a great year this year. Everyone's in a really good mood. I think there's a lot of love in the air.
Nearly 1 billion roses are on their way to the US ahead of the celebration. They are being imported to the country from mostly Colombia and Ecuador. There are more than 14 flights of flowers every day, 7 days a week. leading up to tomorrow.
Ecuadorian roses are exported to all continents, to really far places like the Russian Siberia, Australia.
This is the peak season for cargo movement, due to the Valentine's Day holiday. Our main trading partners, the United States and Europe, have the good habit of receiving many flowers these days. So capacity is doubled, airline operations are doubled, and also the production of the farms.
But elsewhere, it is not flowers, but flavors that are blossoming. I'm talking about Paris, here, famously known as the city of love. This week, you will find couples flocking to the Eiffel Tower, shops stacked with teddy bears, and bridges laden with the locks of love. The city is widely deemed the authority on love. It has capitalized on this notion. It has innovated to keep up with this reputation, and now, amid concerns of floral waste after tomorrow, many shops here have given flowers a fresh twist. They're selling edible flowers.
Donc ça se mange. Ça se mange, je vais le montrer.
Yes, you can eat it. Let me show you. That's it. A bit spicy, but not too strong.
Mais pas trop agressif.
Which brings us to another Valentine's Day darling, chocolates. Cocoa prices have hit a record, and chocolate prices are up 20% compared to last year. If this leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, there are some alternatives, like the good old cards, because fun fact, around 1 billion Valentine's Day cards are exchanged every year the world over, making it the second largest card sending day after Christmas. Then, of course, there's jewelry, which accounts for nearly 30% of all the gifts purchased on Valentine's Day. Because no matter where you are, no matter which stage of relationship you're in, there is a market for you. And this is true even if you're not in a relationship. For many singles out there, a counter-culture movement is underway. The multi-billion-dollar wellness industry has jumped on the trend, where red roses are out, and self-care is in. There are hampers for personal wellness on Valentine's, and that is not all. In India, home delivery apps have a single mode as well. So you can get discounts on ice cream if you want to have a good cry, or exercise equipment if you want to seek revenge with a glow-up. And if you're in Canada, for $5, you can name a rat after your ex, and an owl will eat it for Valentine's Day. Brutal, isn't it? Not just the owl eating the rodent, but also the fact that Valentine's Day increasingly seems less about the magic of love and more about the magic of marketing. Whether you spend the day online, offline, single, or happily in a relationship, brands know that you will be spending money, and they're counting on it. Because if there is money to be had, Cupid's arrow of consumerism rarely misses the mark. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Saudi Arabia, a robot greets visitors at a tech show. In China, a robotic dog assists in street patrols during the Asian Winter Games. In Japan, a snowball fighting contest thrills visitors. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1945, Nazi-occupied Budapest fell to the Russians during World War II. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we put together for you. And now to Bangladesh, touted as the minimum defense from that video. India's neighbors were the first to send the special edition of Vantage live from the White House throughout this week. Yes, Hindu Mandir in we're on our way to Tel Aviv. Measure, but it's also the perfect way to drive.
I don't think
Prime Minister of Bhutan, Sherin Thagbir. Welcome to
60% of the world's
office. Prime Minister Modi did the iron.
We were actually.
What are you doing? How do you like? It's been 1 year since that meeting. Iron bars separate you from the outside. Out the vote effort. Trump had, it says, and at $4.3 trillion. 4.3 300 billion by 2030. That's what we need to tackle climate change.